Hey everyone, it's Brett. And if you love epic fantasy that feels personal and stories where characters wrestle with the same hard choices that we face in everyday real life, then you'll want to tune in to today's guest. Our guest is an author of a study of shattered spells and visions of grandeur, and he has a passion for exploring what it really means to try to do the right thing. When he's not writing, Josiah enjoys spirited intellectual conversations, board games, hiking, and spending time with his 8 younger siblings. So, Josiah DeGraaf, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Thank you so much, Brett. It's a delight to be here with you today.
You are the first fantasy author we've had on the podcast, so it's good to have you.
No way.
Yeah, can you believe it? And believe it or not, I'm not usually the biggest fantasy reader, so yours is the second one I've ever read. So I had a goal this year that in my reading goals, I was going to dip into some genres that I don't normally read, and fantasy was one of them. My very first book is a Brandon Sanderson book, The Way of Kings. And that's like a 1,200 page tome. So, and I'm told that's a very ambitious first read for fantasy reads. So
I would say so. I love Brandon Sanderson, but starting with The Way of Kings as your first fantasy novel, I would use the word ambitious for that. But yeah, that's great.
Did you like the book? Yeah.
I do. The Stormlight Archive is one of my favorite fantasy series. So
yeah,
it's a slow build, but
is it? One of my co-hosts, Charity, she loves Brandon Sanderson, and I'm about 400, a little over 400 pages into it. And I was like, I was telling her one day, I said, I just don't know if this book's for me because I'm 400 pages into it and I still don't know what the heck's going on. And she was like, give it time. It's a slow burn. So that's what I'm doing. Much. So yours is the second fantasy book I've ever read. And I really enjoyed it. But before we get into that, tell the listeners where you're from, where you live.
Yeah, so I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I live in one of the small river towns along the Ohio River. I grew up here, spent some time in the South, and then came back up here a couple of years ago and love the frigid North, although a little bit less during this time of winter.
Yes, you and I talked about it a little before the podcast. We've kind of got a little bit of a snowmageddon plowing across half of the country, and ours started last night. We've got about 6 inches as of time of recording. We got about 6 inches on the ground. They say another 6 to 8 coming, which in the South, people are running for their lives. They're psychotic about it. So definitely stay off the roads if you live in the South. So you live in the East, up in the eastern part of the country. So you're a little bit more used to it. So yours is starting, I think you said tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow, the wee hours of the night, I expect to wake up tomorrow morning and see lots and lots of snow on the ground.
Do you love it or do you hate it?
It's the sort of thing where I like it for the first couple days, and then I'm kind of like, well, we've seen it. It's here. It's old. I enjoy the summers in PA a lot more than I enjoy the winters.
Do you? Oh, okay. See, I'm not a summer person, but it's hot and humid and gross, and I'm just not a fan of summer. But we're lucky here in that most of the time when we have weather like this, we're far enough south. We can literally have 6 inches of snow on the ground, and the next day it'll be completely gone because it's 70 degrees. So it's so weird here. You guys probably don't have that as much because I figure you probably have longer spans. Yours probably sticks around a lot longer, the snow and stuff. So, yeah.
It does. I expect that the snow we get this week is probably going to be here for several weeks.
Yeah. See, that's why you guys get tired of it. Listeners, stick with us. I promise we're not going to talk about the weather. So tell everybody about your journey to becoming an author. Writing a novel is a very ambitious project to embark on for the first time. So when did you know you wanted to be an author? Tell us a little bit about your path to becoming an author.
Yeah, so I started writing just about as soon as I was old enough to be able to hold a pencil and write letters. So I co-wrote my first little picture book with my mom when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and throughout a lot of my childhood, it was just a fun hobby that I'd have different ideas for stories and characters, and I'd want to write about them. And it was for my 13th birthday that my mom took one of the little small books that I'd written and used one of the online printing services to print out an actual book copy of the book for me. And I remember distinctly that moment of holding something I wrote in my hands and
Yeah.
just how cool that experience was. And, that was really a clarifying moment for me that, this was something I wanted to do long term and to be able to do as a published author. And really kept writing from there. I think one of the things I most appreciate about stories is just the opportunity it gives us to be able to explore, big questions or moral dilemmas or things that I'm just wrestling through myself in a fictional context. Most stories I write because I've got different things I'm wrestling with in my own life. And, I find it helpful when I'm reading stories about, characters who are wrestling with similar but distinct questions from me. And also as an author, I find it very helpful to be doing the same through my writing. So I love the opportunity that stories give us to wrestle through hard things without the pressure that I'm the one responsible for figuring this out myself. It's the
Yes.
characters who are doing it, and I get to be along for the journey, for all the fun, and not as much of the actual struggle that comes when you're in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, it's so much fun. And you're right. As an author, even I'm about to publish my 8th book in February, and it's still there is nothing more exciting than having your book in your hand for the first time to get that first physical
Hmm.
copy. I don't think it ever gets old. Now, maybe when I get to book
No.
number 80, it'll be like, been there, done that. But that's an exciting thing for an author. So you write epic fantasy for our listeners that maybe aren't, maybe they're not fantasy readers. Can you tell us what is epic fantasy and what makes a story epic? Is that
Ooh.
something you can put to words?
Well, there is a certain facet of epicness that just transcends words, but I'm going to give it my best shot and see what we can do. So I would say that epic fantasy is it's a story that has fantastical elements, things that could actually exist in the real world. In my story, it's that characters can do magic by playing musical instruments. In other worlds, it's might be something else like in Brandon Sanderson. It's that you've got these huge hurricanes that are sweeping over the system, and he also has a magic system as well. It's going to
Yes.
vary from story to story, but it's set in a secondary world. It's got these fantastic elements. It's set in the secondary world that isn't Earth, right? So
Hmm.
you might think of something like what Tolkien did with Middle Earth. And yes, for the avid Middle Earth fans, I do know that Middle Earth is technically supposed to be an old version of our own world, but for most readers, we read it and it's a completely different secondary world. Lewis also kind of does this in Chronicles of Narnia. It's more of a portal fantasy, so they go from the real world into a different world. And epic fantasy is kind of like you start in that different world and you never come to the real world. So the whole story is set within that secondary world. Often there are big stakes like the fate of a kingdom or the fate of the world is at stake. But I'd say that the core that makes epic fantasy is the fact that it's set in some secondary world where there are some high level stakes that the protagonist is trying to overcome in order to save the country, the world themselves, in addition to generally growing along the way.
I don't know if you know the answer to this. This just kind of popped into mind as you were talking. So you said a lot of times epic fantasy is centered in a world separate from ours. So do the characters in that world know our Earth exists usually? Is that anything you've
Generally
ever
not.
not generally?
I No, I mean, unless like there are sometimes they exist if you're doing kind of a multiverse or portal fantasy, kind of like Narnia. But most of the time in epic fantasy, it's a completely different world with zero connections to the real world.
So that's kind of one thing. That's what I was telling Charity, my co-host. She's a big fantasy reader, and I said one thing about the fantasies that I've read so far that really is different for me and that I kind of struggle with as a reader, and maybe it's just because I'm a newbie at reading fantasy, is like sometimes it's hard to wrap my mind around what everything means because it's so separated from the world as we know it here on earth. And so like how do you as an author, how do you create that world and how do you keep it all straight? Because in your book, I'm about 250 pages into it. And honestly, it took me probably about 100, 150 pages to be like, okay, I think I kind of understand what's going on. That's got to be hard as an author. How do you do that?
Yeah, so for myself as an author, I tend to feel like that one of the best ways to do it is just to keep things simple. So there's some authors who, when they're creating their secondary world, they've got all these unique, cool ideas they want to throw into the world and how it works. And generally, the approach I take is I really only want to take one or two unique things that matter into the world that makes it different. And instead of just throwing a dozen things, I'm taking one or two and really digging into these ideas and how does it make the story different. For example, one of those two ideas in my book is the idea that people can use magical instruments to control the five elements. And so one of the things I did is to think a lot about, well, if people can use music to control fire or lightning or do telekinesis, what's that going to change in society? How does it change the way you transport things? We just can have a lutist strumming his lute and moving things telekinetically with his mind. Or what does it do to architecture when it's all sculpted by musicians instead of having to be built with bricks or in different ways like that? So I generally, in most of my stories, have one or two things that make the world unique, and then just try to think about what are all the weird little crannies and niches that this is going to change the kind of world that it is. And of course, it also has different geography, some different races, different politics and culture, and something like that. But I try to keep the fantastical elements at a minimum, so I can really dig in and hopefully both avoid confusing readers as much and make it easier for me as the author to craft that kind of story, because I don't have to come up with as many ideas.
Yeah. Now, since you're doing fantasy, how long does it take you to like conceptualize the story before, because for me, it doesn't really take a lot, because everything is here on Earth. I don't really have to go into a lot of world building. How long does it take you to conceptualize a novel before you can jump into writing on average?
It will generally take me about 1 to 2 months, depending on the story. And most of those 1 to 2 months is trying out different ideas and discarding them until I find the ideas I feel like really work that I can really stick with.
Yeah. Okay. So your story, a study of shattered spells, again, was not only is it fantasy, it was also different for me in that it's dark academia. That's another genre that I've never read. So for listeners that may not know what that is, can you kind of give us a little crash course on what dark academia is?
Yeah, dark academia is kind of an interesting subgenre of fantasy because in many ways, dark academia is, it stems a little bit more from vibes than from concrete things. But generally, the idea of dark academia is it's, as academia suggests, it's set in, a school or university, and as the dark moniker suggests, there's often going to be, prominent themes of corruption in the school, and of things that just aren't right. Generally, there's some kind of institutional corruption, so there's some kind of struggle against authority in a dark academia story. Sometimes dark academia stories are often going to deal with more sensitive topics in the kinds of issues that pop up in the school and the different manifestations of evil that might exist. There are also some aesthetic things. A lot of dark academia stories are going to, harken back to, say, British prep schools in the late 1800s. So you can think of like the big, classical architecture, reading, your Plato and your Aristotle. Generally, there is a lot of competitiveness and kind of a vying for who's going to be, the best student that's in the school. And if you ever want to look on Pinterest and you just search dark academia, Like there's a very specific vibe and color palette for Dark Academia that you can see there. Now, I didn't fully lead into all those elements, with my own story because it's not set in a British prep school or at something that looks anything like that. But I did like the idea of a genre that's dealing with some of the brokenness of the world and some of the hard things and exploring some of the questions that the story that I wanted to explore in that story, but from more of a Christian perspective for, what does it look like to be exploring this brokenness, but not in a way that's, wallowing in it or just spending time in it just for the sake of darkness, but is ultimately looking at it, what does it look like to face the parts of our own lives that are dark or broken, and to seek light and victory through them.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I haven't quite finished the book yet, but I really think for listeners that enjoy Harry Potter, you definitely would enjoy your book for sure. So there's kind of a Christian readers are kind of varied in what they like in Christian fiction, in that there are some readers that want the Christian message to just smack you over the head with a brick, like a brick. And then there are others that like a more subtle approach. That's kind of what I like in Christian fiction. I don't mind books that have heavier Christian themes, but I tend to prefer a more subtle approach to Christian fiction. What does a study of shattered spells look like in that aspect for prospective readers?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix, but it's going to be more of the latter. You're not going to find any conversion scenes in the book, or scenes that are explicitly talking about Christianity. The characters in the story are religious. They do believe in God, but readers are going to note that there are some differences between the religion that exists in the world of a study of shattered spells and true Christianity. I'm not trying to you depict a biblical Christianity in the book.
Yeah.
But my hope is that while it is a different religion, there's going to be enough similarities. And as an author, I'm coming to this from a Christian perspective, and so my hope is that my Christian worldview comes out, and the thematic questions that the characters are wrestling with, and they'll be able to grapple with these important questions we have to grapple with as Christians, and appreciate the thematic aspects of the book, even if Christ isn't going to be mentioned on the page. There's not going to be a conversion scene, but it's still drawing from a Christian worldview.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go into the book again for listeners and viewers. It's called A Study of Shattered Spells. It's by Josiah DeGraaf. That is spelled Degraaf. If you want to look it up on Amazon or everywhere. Are your books available everywhere? Where can readers find them?
Yeah, it should be available at any major online retail store online.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask you just a couple of little questions here. Then we're going to let you loose on telling us a little bit about it. Who are the Madge characters in your book? Is it Madge?
Yeah. Mage, yes.
Mage,
so
okay.
There's a lot of different mage characters. The story is set at a battle mage school where students are being trained to use their musical instruments for war. So the protagonist is Kalina. She is previously a commander on the battlefield who has come to this magic school in order to train a prophesied hero to save her nation. And so, as she's at the school, she is both interacting with other teachers and some of these other mages who are teaching younger mages. But a lot of the story it's a teacher-student story. And so a lot of it is her working with some of the different students to prepare them for the battlefield. I drew on the different types of instruments that exist in the real world, and each of them do different things. So we have some mages who use drums to control flames, others who use violins to control lightning. We've got lutes that can do telekinesis, flutes that can control water, trumpets that can control and mold physical objects. So we have these different mages that are able to use these different musical instruments in order to try and save their country and control things. And looking at what does it actually take to train someone to be a hero, because it's not quite as simple as sometimes it comes off in certain stories. I used to be a high school teacher, and I drew a lot of my experience of working with students and both the joys and the challenges of that to think about well, what would it actually look like if your task was trading a prophesied hero?
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that. How much of your experience as an actual teacher feeds into the story? So that's interesting. Yeah,
It definitely feeds in a lot. There are a lot of just little moments or common experiences you have that I wove all throughout the book. And
yeah,
one of the like a common piece of writing advice is to write what you know. And as a fantasy author, I don't always do as well with that advice because most of the stuff I'm writing about is not stuff that I know. But
yeah.
I
It's
really
made up.
enjoyed this book. Yeah. But I really enjoyed this book, being able to draw on that experience as a classroom teacher, to be able to include a lot of those kinds of experiences in the story, even if I wasn't teaching at a battle mage school.
Yeah. Do your students think it's really cool to have an author? I know you don't teach now, but do you ever talk to them? Do they think it's really cool, or could they care less?
Some of them could probably care less, but I have been able to hear from a lot of my old high school students who, picked up the book and enjoyed it, or, maybe they're not reading, but they still think it's cool that their previous, English teacher is publishing books and everything. So I occasionally hear from them, and it's always a delight as a teacher just to be able to hear from students you had in the past, hear how they're doing, what's going on in their lives. So it's always a joy to hear from them.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Okay, listeners, we're going to be very careful not to give any spoilers, so you don't have to worry about that here. So
Yeah, one of the things I found fun about writing the story, and this is one of the things I like about the fantasy genre and secondary worlds, is being able to explore what something like music would look like in a world where music isn't just for art; it's also for very practical activities of
mhm,
doing things, and how that affects people's views of instruments.
yeah,
In this story, I designed a world where most people don't really see the beauty of instruments because they don't play the violin just for its beauty. They play it because they want to strike their enemies with lightning. And the
yes,
protagonist is one of the few people in the world who actually sees that no, like this is beautiful, and maybe the music that we're playing should be more than just for pragmatic things. Maybe we can be better appreciating the beauty of what it is we're actually doing. And I won't
mhm,
reveal where all of that goes in the story, but I like just being able to explore how the things that we do affect things, and sometimes things that become practical, we just miss the innate beauty in that. I think there's a lot of things in the real world where that can be the case, where we stop admiring something because we're just thinking about what we can get out of it. And so I liked exploring with that in this world, and hopefully in a way that's reminding readers in the real world of the real beauty and power of music, as we've got some of the characters grappling with this in a very different situation.
yeah, yeah. That was a very cool. I remember the first time I read that the practical use of the. I thought that was a really cool concept. I had never seen that in a book before. So tell the listeners, who is the prophesied hero. We hear about this character a lot in the book.
Yeah, so the prophesied hero is Emil. He's a young man who is prophesied at birth that he would save his nation, but that he would die in the process of saving his nation. And there are a couple of things I want to play around with Emil, and one of those things is if you grow up always being told that you're a prophesied hero, you're one of the most important people in the country, but also that you're going to be dying young because of the
Mhm.
fact that that's what the prophecy is. How does that affect you as a person? Both how is it going to be tempted for it to have things go to your head when you're always being told that you're going to be this important, as well as how does it affect you when you don't necessarily believe you're going to have a lot of time on this earth, and so you need to make the most of the time that you have. A lot of the story has to do with the fact that at the beginning he's not quite the hero he needs to be, and we have Kalina trying to not just train him to be good enough to beat the enemy, but also to help him morally improve and into what it means to really be a hero. Um, one of the things that I enjoyed about teaching is, I like to say that I got into teaching because I love books and literature and teaching them. But what kept me there was really the fact that I realized I love my students a lot more than I love books. And there's a very particular kind of experience when you're working with a student who's growing and maturing and really trying to decide who they're going to be as a person, and helping to guide them in the right direction, and both the joys and challenges that come with that. that I wanted to put into the character of Emil and Kalina in their relationship as she's trying to help them figure out, what does it mean, not just to do the right thing, but to become the kind of person who's truly heroic.
Yeah. Well, take us into the book. Kind of give us a little overview of it.
Yeah. So, A Study of Shattered Spells is about a first-year teacher who is tasked to train a prophesied hero and given 8 months to do so. She's never taught before, and she isn't quite expecting that when she goes into the school, not only is this prophesied hero very much not ready, but she also has other teachers who don't like her being there because they wanted to be the one to train the prophesied hero. And while the school claims to be the best magic school in the country, she soon begins discovering that not everything is quite right. There's a lot of things happening behind the scenes that she doesn't know about. And as she's realizing just how many problems exist in the institution, she has to figure out, how do I protect my students when the administration is turning a blind eye to things, and protect them while still keeping my job and balancing all of the different duties and responsibilities I have here while still being a good person and ultimately saving the country from an army of human sacrificers that are intent on invading it. So that's a basic pitch for the story. Like we've talked about, there's a lot of music, magic, and other things that I found fun as an author to include. So it's designed for readers who grew up with magic school stories like Harry Potter, or maybe the Skullman series, and are now looking for a story that's revisited from an adult, from a teacher's perspective, for what it looks like to step on the other side of the teacher's desk.
If readers like really flawed characters, I will say this is a good story for that. Our prophesied hero, he is, the hero, but he is very flawed. So, yeah. And we can't go into much in that because that we would get into spoiler territory with that. So is this a YA novel? Who's the target audience for this?
Yeah, it's an adult novel. While I have had some of my students who are teens read the book and enjoy it, it's primarily intended for adults. And kind of what it looks like when we're adults, kind of stepping back into places we used to be in, but now we're the adults, we're the ones with authority, and we're the ones responsible to help those who are weaker and more vulnerable than ourselves. So it's an adult fantasy.
Oh, okay. For you listeners that are like, interesting, but I'm not really into fantasy, I really think this would be a good one for you to try. Because like I said, I'm kind of a novice when it comes to reading fantasy, and I am sucked into it. I'm about 250 pages in. I normally don't do podcasts until I've read the whole book, but we kind of had to flip-flop around. So I've got about 100 pages left. So even if you think you don't like fantasy, I would say definitely give this book a chance. But one thing I do want to ask you, Josiah, is one thing I'm noticing about fantasy in the two that I've read is there's a lot of very unusual names, character names, and kingdom names in the book. How in the world do you come up with all these unusual names? I think that is one of the cool aspects of fantasy.
I will say that I do love the ability to come up with unique names. I'm a millennial. I know the meme is that a lot of millennials just give their weird names to their kids. I try to, not going to give a weird name to a kid, but I am going to give a weird name to my characters and enjoy doing that. The hack that I use and find helpful is I tend to look for, a real world culture that I want to use as kind of the basis for what my names are going to feel or sound like. Because you don't really want a character with a really weird name and then another character is just named Joe, right? You want the names to feel like they're coming from the same culture. So I generally start with some real world culture that I'm just going to use as a starting point for the language. And then I'll look at different common names. I'll generally take the name and then make a few different tweaks to it. So I'm not just taking it outright, but to choose some kind of culture and then tweak some common names within the culture to create names that are going to both be unique to the world while also sounding like etymologically they're all coming from a similar base and a similar culture.
Yeah, and I will say the names in the book are unusual, but they're not so unusual that you can't pronounce them. So I don't think you're going to have any problems like that. So I think we're going to start wrapping this up. Is there anything else about the book you wanted to say before we go into the wrap up?
But one other thing I'll mention is that one of the things that I always love as a storyteller is not just being able to read a great story, but also to be able to see what do these characters and what does this world look like. So, I also made sure in the book to work with different artists to include a lot of illustrations in the book, so you can kind of visualize what does this unique
Yes.
world and the characters look like. And that was one of my favorite things about going the indie route with this book, is being able to include all those illustrations throughout the story.
Yeah. No, are you the artist, or did you find an artist to do those? Because that is the
You should be
cool.
very happy that I was not the illustrator.
Oh, okay.
I knew better than to do it myself, so I hired
Yeah.
that out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I don't have an artistic bone in my body, so at least when it comes to drawing. So again, a study of shattered spells by Josiah DeGraaf, Degraaf. So what do you hope readers will take away from reading this book?
Yeah, kind of as I alluded to before, a lot of dark academia stories really wrestle with institutional corruption and what does it look like when your authorities are corrupted. And I think that's an important theme to wrestle with. But one of the things I discovered myself during my time as a teacher is that I think sometimes we can look at corrupt authority and kind of come away with the idea of, well, maybe just any authority is bad. One of the things I had to realize as a teacher is actually it's really important that I do have authority within the school, because authority is also how I'm able to protect students when they're being bullied by other students, when other things are happening to them. Authority can be very easily corrupted, but it also can be used for a lot of really good ends when you have the ability to protect those who are around you. And
Mhm.
so one of the questions I was really grappling with the story is, what does a good exercise of authority look like? And that's not a simple answer. As a teacher, there are some times
Yeah.
when I used my authority well. There are some times where I messed up and I used my authority in ways I shouldn't have, and then would have to go and apologize to students for making the wrong judgment call. And so my hope is that as readers are reading through the story and seeing the different ways that the protagonist is wrestling with it, that they're able to come away with a better idea of with the different places in my life where I have authority, what are the things I ought to be avoiding? What are the ways I can use it well to be ultimately using the authority I have to bless, serve, and protect others?
Yeah. All right. Good stuff. So you are the program director of the Young Writers Workshop. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Young Writers Workshop is my day job. So I work for a program that our goal is to work primarily with teen writers and help them to hone their craft, write more, and ultimately finish more projects that they're proud of. So I love working with young writers in the day job. It's an online program. We have about 1,500 students or so in it, and every day is something a little bit new, because students are always unique and bring new things to the table, and that's one of the things that's delightful about it.
Yeah. Tell us about Lorehaven.
Yeah, so I'm also a features editor for Lorehaven, and Lorehaven is a website that celebrates fantastic Christian fiction, particularly those of the fantasy or the science fiction flair. So we've got a podcast. We release regular articles and book reviews on different fantastical works. So if you're someone who either enjoys speculative Christian fiction or would just like to dip your toe into the water a little bit more, we've got a lot of recommendations and resources for how to find great books made by Christian authors.
Oh, okay. Do you participate in the podcast, or is that just one of the things under that organization?
I don't participate in the podcast.
Okay.
I'm more on the article side, and both editing articles and writing articles myself of different things I'm reading.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. So what's a genre that you rarely read?
Ooh, I'm probably gonna have to go with historical fiction for this. I've read some great historical fiction books, but I tend to find that for myself, I kind of have to get myself in the right mood and headspace in order to be able to really appreciate. It's not a genre that comes quite as naturally to me, so I don't read it
Ah,
quite as much.
is fantasy kind of your go-to genre?
Fantasy would be my go-to genre, that along with science fiction.
Oh, okay. If you could dabble writing in a genre, what would that be?
Hmm.
Other than what you write in?
I tend to enjoy good YA contemporary novels, and just those kinds of slice of life novels during the teen years. Um, I don't know how good I would be at writing them because it's a very different kind of story from epic fantasy. But
Yeah.
uh, I enjoy dabbling in that genre enough as a reader that if I were, had to shift gears into something else, I feel like that might be what I want to try my hand at.
Yeah. This book, since it takes place at an academy, you do have younger characters in the book. I'm not normally a fan of YA because I don't really find young characters that interesting. Young kids are not that interesting. But in your book, like I feel like it has just a little flavor of YA to it with those younger characters, but I don't
Hmm.
get that YA that's real strong YA touch to, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like I didn't
Yeah.
feel like the kids were annoying because they're kids. So I really do think, even though this is targeted to adults, I would say that older, maybe teenage readers could definitely read this if they wanted to. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say so, and I've been able to hear from several of my older students who have picked it up and enjoyed it. So I definitely know that's been the case for older teens who picked the book up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what's your favorite book of all time?
Oh, that's
That's
a
a
very
hard
hard question.
question.
That is a
Yeah.
hard question. Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive is definitely up there. You know, because I was a classics teacher, there's a lot of classics that really resonate with me. So, Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky is also going to be one of those books that made a big impact on me. And I love some good 18th century Russian literatures, or
Ah,
so 18th 19th century Russian literature tends to be my jam.
that's your jam. All right. Uh, Tell us a little bit about your book, Visions of Grandeur, if listeners want to check out any of your other books.
Yeah, so Visions of Grandeur and Other Stories is the first book I released. It's a digital short story collection following different medieval superheroes who need to decide how far they're willing to go to save lives. If you go to my website, you can grab a copy of the book for free there, just as a free
Oh,
digital download. So readers can visit my website, josiahdegraaf.com, if medieval superheroes are up their alley and they want to read some different short stories about them.
all right. Or you can go buy it on Amazon if you want. Is it available on Amazon, or is that
It
just
actually
available?
isn't available on Amazon
Okay.
yet. It likely will be by the end of this year, but right now it's only
Okay.
available on my website.
Okay. Gotcha.
The other story I have is Lies of the Mind.
Okay.
That's going to be a mystery novella that's coming out in a couple of months. So it's not out yet, but if the idea of a mystery novella from a mind reader's perspective is up your alley, you can go to my website to learn more about that and when that's releasing.
All right. So what are you working on now? I think that's I saw on your website that you're working on a book two to
Mm-hmm.
Shatter's study of. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I am working on a second book that's going to be following a study of shattered spells that will be releasing next year. I want to be careful on how much I say about it because a lot of it depends on the climax of the book.
Yeah.
We'll simply say that training a hero and saving a country is a bigger plot that can happen in one book, and there are
Yeah.
some pretty big plot twists that happen at the end of book one that's going to change the way that the protagonist is going to have to
Ah.
try and save her country moving into book two. So that's
I
what we'll say
cannot.
about it so far.
Okay, yeah, I can't wait to dig into the ending. That's how I'm going to be spending the rest of my snow days. So,
There we go. Perfect.
yeah, so perfect. For any listeners who would like to follow you online or just look you up, where can they go?
Yeah, so they can go to my website, josiahdegraaf.com, or if you don't know how to spell my Dutch name, you can also go to a studyofshatteredspells.com to see the book as well. I'm also on social media, so you can also look me up on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, though I tend to be most active on Instagram.
On Instagram. Okay, good deal. I think we're going to wrap this up. Bookish Introverts Podcast. You can find us. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We've got a small presence on TikTok. I've got an author page on Facebook and on Instagram, authorbrettnelson.com. You guys come and check us out. Is there anything else you want to say before we end this, Josiah?
I think that stories are great opportunities for us to just be able to relax and have a great time alongside, just having opportunities to grapple and wrestle with the big questions of life. So whatever kind of stories you enjoy reading, I hope you're able to find that next story that's able to help you to do both at the same time and empower you to face the brokenness of the world with confidence through fiction.
Perfect. Once again, a study of Shattered Spells by Josiah DeGraaf. Go buy it, go check it out. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we will catch you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.